What's going on, everybody? I'm YouTube's popeyJN. Welcome back to A Case of Distrust. You guys actually really like this, and I'm really glad to see that people like this because I think this is going to be a fun series. And I know there's a lot of reading and not much gameplay, but I like these kind of story novel thingy-majiggies, so I want to continue with it. But before I go any further, gotta kick it off right. Let's get back into it, guys. I can't remember where we actually were when we left off. Connor Green had just given me a case that involved his bootlegging. I wasn't sure if he'd be worth my time. I decided to head to Southern Coffee and consult with Frankie. Good old Frankie. There immediately came a banging on the front door. Beyond a nuisance. This cat was psychic, too. You order out? I asked him. Open the door. Oh, we already went through this, didn't we? Did we already go through this? In the doorway was a regrettably familiar face. I stared at him. A hired hand for whomever needed a job done, but Green snitched whenever he was put in the squeeze. Working the beats, I remember all too well. Remarkably, the underground had been blind to it, but Green wasn't particularly assiduous, I think. I was certain the criminal ranks would eventually plug him. He looked at me through the doorway with a very coy smile. Well, ain't you gonna invite me in? I started closing the door, but he stuck out a foot to stop me. Hey now. He chided? Foul way to treat a customer, Maloney. So that was his angle, hiring me as a detective. I wondered what a bootlegger would need with a private eye, but he answered without my prompt. I'll make this quick. I can't take this to the hog house, or the pigs would laugh me out. And other dicks just aren't as tempting. His grin widened. Thought this would be quick, I said, and I started rolling a cigarette. It wasn't quick, and I'd already rolled and lit a second smoke. When Green finally finished his story, I noted the important bits of my book. It had started with a letter slipped under his door in a white envelope. The envelope contained a single typewritten leaf, which he handed to me. It read, "End your game, or we'll end you." It had no signature. Instead, ending with only a small scribble in the bottom right corner that resembled a black hand. Green had a lead on the rum-running scheme, a connection from Vancouver. He'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who run the Tin Spoon speakeasy for the mob boss Jerry Ferry. They'd agreed to buy in for more. Green surmised the letter was about his rum running. He suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger, of sending the letter. He told me that Stable ran a barber shop during the day and gave me the address. Green needed to know who the threat was from. He'd get Paul's gang to deal with them and continue his scheme to get rich. If I go snooping myself, he concluded, folks seeing that I'm not trusting people, no trust leads to no customers. I need to play it low key. Which is where you come in. I raised an eyebrow and stared at him through the cigarette smoke. Something in his yawn was still twisted. He must have noticed my reticence, because he said, you know, I work closely with Lewis. I'm sure he'd want to protect me just as much as any other victim. My uncle. I finally accepted Lewis's death. It was the only conclusion possible. He had taken his own life. He was the only officer who'd let me walk the beats, or do more at crime scenes than comfort a widow. He'd been obsessed with helping victims and bringing justice to those beyond salvation. I quit the SFPD and started my own practice, taking his ethos to heart. Was Green worth my time? Would he be worth Lewis's? Green had tipped off my uncle in a few cases. Wondered if that was enough to warrant my protection. Before I could think past the headache, he threw a bill in my lap. Keep the C note as a retainer, and don't worry about getting in touch. I'll find you later to chat. He walked out the front door and let him in and let him go. I let him go. If he was willing to give me $100 with no commitment, I wouldn't stop him. I turned back to my apartment, still confused about the whole story. My headache wasn't helping either. Whenever I lacked clarity, a trip to Southern Coffee was usually a cure. Alright, well, let's go. Let's leave. Here we go. There was only one place I needed to go to clear my head. Southern Coffee. Southern Coffee was a basement dive. It wasn't modern, hip, or even busy. It was my favorite place to go down to paint, especially in the company of the best bartenders in the city. Oh, nice. Nice. I gave my address and slouched in the back seat of the taxicab. I thought a good way to pass the journey might be to chat to the taxi driver. So I spoke. He was young. Not a teenager, but not far off. The redness in his face and the mean scowl told me he was angry. Don't much like driving taxicabs, I offered. He looked quizzically at me through the rearview mirror before understanding what I meant. No, lady. I like it right enough. Just some bozo. Just some bozo for you were here was giving me hell. Cause I look like the boy his daughter's going with. Who went off about my generation was ruining America. That scumbag didn't know jack. Sounds like you know more, I asked. I'm no genius, but you talk to anyone for the last century, they'll tear off your ear about being young. How'd they get so high, I wonder? Given the world in the 1890s, like a smooth running roadster. Then what they do? Bash it on every curb in sight. Their greed, their war, their politics. Now they give us a ruined clunker. And they're mad to our manners when we grab the keys. I agreed with him. The war was the hardest fought, at home and abroad, I said. The old man who put us there had some nerve, he replied hotly. And after those years, they tell us to get in line. It's a bum deal to me, sister. We're in the information age, and the news of the world is crap. They're just angry we can see their folly. The taxicab rolled to a stop. Anyhow, he said, thanks for letting me blow off steam. Have a nice day, miss. I opted out the car and stepped out. Southern Coffee was a ornament diner. Ethel Burgess, the lone waitress, was friendly to help with any inquiries. Of course, if you winked at her right, she'd show you the way to the downstairs toilet where Frankie played bathroom attendant. Southern Coffee had a distinct feeling of home, the familiar smell of mold in the old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. What's up, boy? Frankie tended the bar at Southern Coffee. Though it wasn't his place, I'd never caught a whiff of the real owners. I trusted Frankie to do what was best. I said, "Hello, Frankie," and was met with a smile and a grunt from Franklin Ernest Conway. He was a big fella, both wide and tall, and must have been a little over 50. He had a round head, kind brown eyes, and a cropped ring of grey hair encircling an otherwise bald skull. His voice had a warm trembly that complemented the tobacco and whiskey smells of his speakeasy. I sat at the bar. "You got the spooks, PC?" he asked. "You're worn as a catcher's meat." I suppose my exhaustion showed. "I want $100 for nothing, and I can't let it go." I told Frankie about the case, the threatening letter sent to Connor Green, how he assumed it was related to the bootlegging, and his suspicion of Redstone Stable. The story took longer than I wanted. Frankie showing genuine interest by asking many questions. When I finished, he threw me the whiskey sour he'd been stirring. I took a large gulp and gave a sigh as thanks. "Well, Green's case is better than most of what you're given," he said with some enthusiasm. "At least it's not more of the adultery bunk." "Sure," I replied. "But I started with a goal in mind. What's the point in helping a man like Green?" Frankie clicked his tongue on his teeth. "Lawyer or priest? What's the matter? Let me ask you, are the clients you have now any types you want to help?" I admitted they weren't. I told him that I wanted far more from detecting life. It could be that Green's case shoots your career forward, Malone. I sighed and stared down at my drink. But my daze was interrupted by a basement door opening and then slamming. A small blustering woman began marching towards me. She looked younger than 25 and was a few inches shorter than my 5'6". I thought her grey trench coat was too large for that small frame, which was when I realised it was exactly like the one that had belonged to Lewis. She hurled insults at me a while. All I could do was sit and take it until she ran out of gas and started breathing heavily. I set my drink on the bar and looked at her in the eyes. I inserted a hello. I'm Fearless Malone. How can I help you? Accompanied by a smile as genuine as I could muster. That knocked her off balance. She stumbled over for a few words. And I added, and you are... The flame returned to her eyes. Between clenched teeth, she hissed,
I'm the wife of the bum who sneaks into your bed.
I asked the cat? But humour wasn't her angle, and she launched into another poetic stanza. And he just left your side this morning, she finally ended. And that was when I gathered she was talking about that she was Connor Green's wife. Mrs. Green, I'm a PAI, not your homewrecker. I don't think your husband, in his line of business, would want to bed a dick anyhow. Her look was pure... Her look was pure incredulity.
A woman in that kind of work?
She questioned. I don't believe it. Prove it. Case summary, goals, evidence. Evidence. Green's letter. Show her the letter. I told her about why Connor had come to me. The bootlegging and the threats. You see, Mrs. Green, this is what I do. There's not much more I can show you to prove it. Still took more coaxing for her to believe me, but eventually she came around. She seemed grateful I explained it to her. Apparently she had seen her husband leave my apartment and, distraught, she had followed me all the way to Frankie's basement and decided to confront me.
I suppose I lost my head after what I thought I'd seen,
she said, and she began to cry. Frankie, ever chivalrous to the dimpled girl, came around the bar and held her up. Now that's alright, Mrs. Green. Why don't I hail you a cab and send you back home? She agreed, and they walked together upstairs. When Frankie returned, I said to him, You turned night real quick? He snorted the laugh. Oh, hell. We can't have that siren in here. With a torture yelling like that, every street burglar would have come in to her rescue. Mrs. Green? A torch singer? Well, I learned she was Mrs. Connor Green just now, when she came in here. I'd only seen her as Lil Fanny, singing lead for a jazz band at the Tin Spoon. The Tin Spoon? I said. Tiny Paul's joint? That's where Green is selling his liquor. Say, you think that's where she met her husband? I laughed. You're real sweet, Frankie. He made a sarcastic bow. I shook my head. You're telling me you have escorted our little torture out just to avoid a bit of hot water? Frankie flushed and said, What are you talking about, Malone? I was never good with my emotions, but it was plain that Frankie had instantly fallen for the girl. So what if I had more to squeeze out of her? Oh, sorry, wrong voice. So what if I had more to squeeze out of her, I asked. What more could you possibly want from little Fanny? She can't have anything to do with Green's mess. I considered Franken's point. Maybe she was unrelated to this case. I shrugged and stood up from the bar stool. What had just happened was quite the ruckus. It seemed like my cue to move along. The worn stairs led me outside into the world. I was heading up the stairs when Frankie called after me. So, what are you going to do? I've been thinking about little Fanny. Oh god, sorry. I supposed every mobster had people who cared about them, and she'd be wearing Lewis's old jacket. So perhaps Green and Lewis had become a little closer than I'd realized. I guess I'll take Connor Green's bait, I replied. I've got nothing better to do. I've got nothing better on the stove, and he might need the help. Something still stinks though. Well, what's your plan? The way I see it, I have 3 goals right now. Green hired me for a job. Find the guy that wrote the letter. That's the basic part. But you want more? Asked Frankie. I nodded. Green's a shady character. I have to learn about him. Who is this guy? Dig into his past. I can't go back to him blind. And then there's something about bootlegging. How'd Green get a connection like that? What's his source exactly? Squeezing that lemon might give me a bit more juice. That sounds alright, he said. So where is it you're off to? I've got 3 leads. That bootleg stable, who Green claims sent him the letter, the Tin Spoon Lounge, where I might learn about the Green's rum-running schemes, and Mrs. Green has given me more dirt on her husband. Frankie nodded his approval. Well, if you ever get stuck, come back and see me. You can never solve anything without talking it over. I smiled and went upstairs. Alright. I'm gonna leave this episode here. I know we didn't get that far, but I don't know, I don't want these episodes to be too long. I think half an hour, like the 25-30 minute mark. That's a good length for this series. Otherwise it gets a little bit boring to just sit here and listen to me do voices and read text. So I'm going to leave this episode here. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to favorite it. Don't forget to subscribe if you have not already, guys. Helps me out a lot. There are links to social media in the description box. And there's a new link to the new popeyJN store coming very, very soon. So be on the lookout for that. But thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll talk to you guys in the comments. And until next time, I'm YouTube's popeyJN. Peace out.
Do you understand anything that lives inside my head?